Okay, well, you can fly on this plane, but just so you know, there's a
Okay.
percentage that you could die in a plane crash, but people are still gonna do it, right?
Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming back to another recording of Foul Ball Safety Now Talks. We're coming to the midway season. We're in the middle of June, end of June. We're almost done with the first half of baseball 2026. A lot has happened at Foul Ball Safety Now. Foul ball safety now started back in 2019 when I saw something very disturbing on the news. And at that time, I realized as a baseball fan, a lifelong baseball fan, that really not enough was being done to address the issue of fans getting hurt by foul balls. It's not that I had experienced the foul ball matter myself personally, other than a few times being exposed of the foul ball dilemma. One time sitting really close at a playoff game in New York at Shea Stadium, and I thought I was too close. Another time in Brooklyn, New York, when I was with a group of people, young and old, and we were just standing outside the ballpark in Coney Island in a place called Coney Island, Brooklyn, where they have the famous ride called the Cyclones. There's a team named after that ride, roller coaster, and it's called the Brooklyn Cyclones. And we're just standing outside, people on the avenue, Surf Avenue, and the ball comes outside and hits a young person we were with right in the arm. And we thought that was pretty strange. And it wasn't until years later I realized this is business as usual. There are one or many balls raining down and hitting pavement, window, or people, like in Modesto, California. People can check out the website Foul Ball Safety Now and see. Unfortunately, a woman was hit outside the ballpark. We were contacted by a lawyer. That being said, going back to how it all began, I got introduced to a gentleman by the name of Brendan. Brendan's an investigative reporter. We've interviewed many people over the last 7 seasons, just 3 in the last few months that we've been connected to, victims, people that have been injured. Brendan and I started interviewing these victims, also baseball players, and getting a sense of the history of how these players felt when they were players. We probably reached out to 3 or 400 guys all over the country who either are former professional players or had private schools or academies, and they were coaches, and they took part in interviews with us, about, I would say, 30 of those guys. So we got a good response from the baseball player community. So that's also part of our archives. It's a head scratcher every turn you take when you learn what we learn about the slow moves on when the upgrades come, and are the upgrades solutions? Because we've heard about, since that little girl was hurt when I got involved back in 2019, we've heard very little from the commissioner's office, usually stock responses on what the next upgrade will be or the policy will be when it comes to the installation of more netting. But what's always fallen short is solutions, meaning prevention of these incidents ever happening again, because people go to games. I reference Brianna a lot because Brianna's a mother of a 2-year-old, and she can't just park without strings and conditions attached in places like Modesto, California. In 2023, as I was mentioning, a woman was hit outside the ballpark. Modesto, at the time in 2023, was an affiliate of the Seattle Mariners. There are 30 professional major league teams in the United States and Canada, and there's 120 affiliates. They all have affiliates. Some of these teams, like the Mariners or the Yankees or the Mets, they own those part of those 120 teams, or all. I think the Mets may own all of their affiliates. Maybe the Yankees also own all of their affiliates, but a lot of them are independently owned. I'm not 100% sure who owns in each individual affiliate. But you would think in Modesto, California, a woman sit outside in the parking lot. Brianna, a mother of a baby, she can't even park her car and know that she could just go in carefree, no conditions or strings attached. But in reality, all of the ballparks probably all of the 120 ballparks are sort of connected to either neighboring fields or parking lots or people. And why are they exposed to one or more balls in 3 or 4 hours that are hitting the pavement and potentially hitting them in the head? So a lot has to be done. This is going on in 2026. There's solutions out there. There's architects, engineers, and designers in every zip code that if they would just ask, they would come up with something that finally addresses this issue. We were just speaking to somebody who works on a community board. She was a part of an executive director of some agency, and she has issues or hears about these issues many times, and it's not being addressed about balls leaving fields and going onto streets and things like that. In Queens College, Brianna and I started paying attention what was happening at the colleges a little over a year ago when a Queens College student contacted me and said, "Hey, Jordan, we're worried about our balls going over the sides. There's an elementary school right next door where we play our games." And I'm like, "That's legitimate." So we actually addressed Queens College, and in the tone of our letter, we didn't say that you were the only offender or the only place that has a setup like this. Because Brianna and I recently just Googled Earth 46 D1, 2, and 3 fields, and they seem to all have connecting fields or parking lots. So I think we can do a lot better. It's 2026. Certainly inside the ballpark, which we didn't even address as of yet, other than when the opening on how I got started here regarding the little girl, but there are still balls going over nets. Brianna and I found self-reported injuries in 2025. People on TikTok, 45 people on TikTok have self-reported their injuries at major league games. We have videos. We have bruises on people's faces and testimonies from them saying they're never going to another game because the nets that appear to be improved, yeah, sure, it may appear there's more netting, that's obvious, but who's deciding that that's the solution? Who endorsed that process of upgrading? Was it a team of architects, engineers, and designers that it was a well thought out system done by $1 billion establishment? Or was it more like a one guy who's been responsible for this matter as among many other matters that they're responsible for, maybe wearing too many hats? I believe it's one person wearing too many hats, and it's above their pay grade, and it should have always been a team of architects, engineers, and designers anticipating exactly what the landscape was and all balls prior and all balls coming, bats too. Brendan and I spoke to a few people in the last few months. Bruises are still happening. Bats are still flying over nets in 2026, and we need to address all of those things. Brianna, how are you today?
Doing great, Jordan. Excited to dive into this topic today. Very important, and hopefully, we can shed some light on this issue. So, without further ado, I'd love to invite on our guest host for the day. She is a voiceover and on camera actress. Welcome, Danielle House.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me here today. I'm excited to talk about this topic as a sports lover, and I do have season tickets to the San Francisco Giants. So I do enjoy a baseball game for sure.
Great to
Um,
have you.
thank
Excited to
you.
hear your inquiry. We want to talk to baseball fans and interested people in this topic.
So I do want to say I was actually talking to my husband about this. He's the main fan. I'm kind of just, arm candy for him at the games. No, but we were talking about the Japanese culture
Mhm.
because as you know, baseball is king there, right? I don't know if you had researched the Japanese culture and the baseball games, the things that they do at baseball games for safety. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, we actually learned of a piece that was on HBO a while back, and we picked up some information on how they put up nets and social cues and protocols. So we thought that was interesting. And I don't think they've experienced as many injuries in Japan and the type of injuries that occur as we do in the United States. So I'm somewhat familiar.
Yeah, so they even have whistles and horns and PA announcements, pre-game warnings, and those kinds of things, and even, they call them excite seats.
Yep.
So if they wanna sit in unnetted sections, it's kind of at their own risk. I'm sure
Mhm.
I don't know if they have to sign something, but I thought that was really interesting because I know you were talking about the architecture of things, but in reality, those
Mhm.
cost money, right? So I'm curious to know, like, how the Japanese what the financial side of that. Also, I am an accounting analyst too, my daytime job. Acting's kind of my part-time gig here, but, numbers I'm really into. So, I don't know, I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing, even if some of these ballparks were to even hire people, they actually had, like, a kazoo, like, every time there's a foul ball or a pop-up, a kazoo goes off, so then the fans automatically are aware when that's happening. So, the cost
Yes.
of something like that isn't gonna be as extreme as, like you're saying, bringing in architects and, retrofitting the stadiums or parking lots or whatnot. I just thought that was an interesting way to go and kind of looking at these different cultures and how they do things, and like you're saying, their stats are a lot better than ours. So it brought me to your question of what are these places doing? Is it just a one-man show? Is it a whole team of people? But also the liability of it. So I guess one of my question is, like I said, numbers was a thing. Can you give me some stats? Like how many people has there ever been anyone killed by something like this or
Mhm.
seriously injured?
Yeah, so that's what we've been doing in foul ball safety now. We've collected a lot of research, including what we know and how many people have unfortunately been hit in professional baseball and died, and some of the news reports that came out that are worthy of further discussion, like the NBC investigation, and our own research. And we certainly are finding things just from newspaper articles. Unfortunately, there were 3 people in professional baseball that I know of since 1970 that were hurt and killed. 2 at Dodger Stadium, actually, one in 1970 and the other one in 2018. 1970 was a 14-year-old boy who died at Dodger Stadium, who clearly was hit and died a few days later, and it wasn't till, like, 45 years later, 46 years later when Nets went above dugouts. So you would have thought that why wasn't the community told that near misses are part of the regular experience? And unfortunately, in this case, Alan got hit and he died. I just feel like once the numbers are exposed, I know you're into accounting, you'll be scratching your head. And we'll get into that into Exhibit A in a sec. But the other person who died at Dodger Stadium in 2018, she got hit at Dodger Stadium and died a few days later. That's Linda. Now, she was hit in the low section behind home plate where the net went above, where the ball went above the net, and it wasn't until Labor Day 2019, she was hit in August of 18, and then for certainly the months of September and October, they had made the playoffs that year, nobody knew, it wasn't announced on media that somebody who's sitting in that seat was hit and died. Then it wasn't until 2019 when it was announced, Willie Weinbaum from ESPN makes a report about casualties in professional baseball, and Linda Goldblum's name wasn't even on the list. And the daughter, Jana Brody, she connected with Willie and said, "My mother's not on the list." And then the local media went over the house. This wasn't until like 6 or 8 months later. And that whole year, April, May, June, July, and August, there was no net raised above. It wasn't till Labor Day 2019. So why did the Dodgers wait that full month of September and October, and then April, May, June, July, and August? Doesn't mean those people who attended those games in 2019 knew about what happened just because it was reported. Doesn't mean those people sitting in that seat told that I'm sitting in the same seat as that woman was hit. I don't think most of those people knew. And then 4 days later, during a Labor Day break, the nets go up higher. And why did it wait so long? So we're talking a lot of time, a lot of gap, and one another doctor's wife died in professional baseball. he happened to be a doctor. We tried to reach out to him years later in 2010 or 2011. She was struck and she died. I don't know if she died instantaneously or died a few days later. Um, and that was in Texas, San Angelo, Texas. Now, getting to the numbers, Exhibit A1 demonstrates just how many foul balls there are per game. We have something at the website called Exhibit A1. And we took a published report from 2019 and it demonstrated how many foul balls there were per game. Brendan and I incorporated our own research and we call it Exhibit A1. Once families realize there's 2,460 major league games every single year, there's also 5 times as many more professional games every single year. There's around 14,000 professional games every year in places like Modesto and Brooklyn. And they said 53 foul balls a game in a 9-inning game in MLB. Well, let's say it's pretty close in all of the other professional leagues. But for the moment, let's just cut the number more less in half to 25 from 53. If you multiply 14,000 times 25, that's 350,000 foul balls a year throughout professional baseball, not even including the major leagues. And that report from 2019 demonstrated that close to 50% of balls go into these particular hot zones. So half of those balls would be 170, 175,000. And some of those hot zones are just past end of dugouts where those little children were smashed in that 2019 ESPN video. You would see that why are we there to begin with? It's almost an opportunity to retrace your steps and realize the inevitable close call at high speeds is coming your way. So that's what we want to say about that, Danielle.
Those were some good stats, and I didn't realize how many foul balls, but I guess my follow-up question for that would be, then you were talking about the Modesto situation. What would be your ideal situation? Because, you're talking about talking to architects and doing all those things, but
Mhm,
spending those kinds of funds, like,
mhm.
I don't even know how much something like that would be. Are you just talking about more netting? Because 'Cause you're talking about the parking lot? Are you talking about signage? Like, what would be a solution in your eyes?
I mean, I think we're in 2026, baseball civilized society. Once we're committed to that, it's not gonna be the money issue. Billions and billions of dollars are available. So each ballpark, of course, it'll cost money to make the improvements, to bring solutions, to bring a baseball truthful experience, no more strings and conditions attached. It's not like building infrastructure to, like, a new highway. It's somebody needs to get the right mesh and the right pole and the right system in place that's going to say, "Hey, hey, this is exactly where you park. This is exactly where you enter the ballpark. This is exactly where you sit in the ballpark." If you're like someone like Brianna who doesn't want surprises or conditions with strings attached, can you please give her a place to park and go in and have a snack, be there and not have a care in the world? Unfortunately, that's never been the case, Danielle, but I think we can get there. The commitment to the conversation is what is really what it's about. The 3 of us talking is terrific, but we need others to see this and get inspired. I think that's where we're at. We just want to effectively start the conversation.
So
Yeah.
being more open as to, "Hey, this can happen. Hey, these are hot spots," not trying to hide the truth,
Well,
right?
again, it has yes, it just hasn't been presented. Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunately it. I think people are gonna be open to interpreting their past experiences. That's what we do. We bring to the inquiring minds wanna know, like, "Hey, why are you at this for 7 years? Why is this your 7th season?" Because we have not effectively, as of yet, started this conversation. And I think once we do, we will get most baseball fans to feel like this should have been worthy of a discussion a long, long time ago. And then we could deal with the present. What's done is done. It ain't good. We're not happy. but we're in the middle of season 7 and trying to effectively start a conversation so the future could look bright, and someday in the near future, we could all talk about, "You remember way back in those years of 2026 and before, when business as usual was done like that?" And we'd be like, "Yeah." And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. What's done
But
is done.
but don't you think that they're I know you're saying, "Oh, the billion-dollar company that they can invest these funds," but honestly, there's
Yes.
always a bottom line. So do you really think that they care about the fans this much to make a change? I mean, if it's gonna save them, say, $100,000, they're gonna save those $100,000, or they bump up the price of the tickets, put it on the consumer, and then, I don't know, you could lose fans that way. I guess I just think
Mhm.
of it as a full picture. I mean, the MLB
Mhm.
is a huge, huge corporation. I don't if it could be done, they would be doing it. So I guess the question is why? Is it all about money? And I guess what's your
Right.
opinion on
Well, I know Brianna one time elaborated a little bit. It's very hard for them to finally acknowledge that we've been wrong all this time and why they haven't had the courage to address how it's been done. The history isn't great. We can put that and demonstrate that in writing, in a presentation, through a PowerPoint. And I think for them to finally acknowledge that the history of baseball isn't as pristine as they wanna keep it, it's hard. It's hard for them to do that. Again, I am painting the picture that we're in the dark ages, and it's time for us to get out of it. So the people that work within the game right now, they're not ready for that. And I think we need to demand that they must be. Now, it's not a matter of $100,000 per facility or $1,000,000 per facility because there's billions and billions available. It's not about the bottom line and the dollar. It's about how they knew in advance. Judge Flanagan from Cook County, when I meet her one day, she'll say, "Jordan, you keep on mentioning my name," because there was a case, Rybarsky versus White Sox, the Chicago White Sox, back in 2018, where she implied willful wanton conduct. The White Sox knew in advance, like all major league teams know in advance. She implied that they knew before the season started that the nets weren't high enough, far enough, wide enough. That's my interpretation of Judge Flanagan's impression of this particular case. And that case ended up being settled. But all professional baseball clubs have the data, all know that people like Brianna, that there's conditions and strings attached to being a mother of a 2-year-old and parking in a parking lot or going inside a game in these professional facilities. And why aren't they just addressing it and finally having a civilized conversation? Danielle, 99 more much more than 99% of the people will continue living baseball as wholesome apple pie, unconditional good times and fun. I have something on the website called the Less Than 1% Injured Club, and those are people that are part of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people that have always entered into that less than 1% injured club, and there's no end in sight. So,
so in your opinion,
yes,
it's an image that they're trying
it's
to portray,
yeah,
that they're trying to keep.
yeah, and nobody wants to deal with, reconciliation today or solutions today. The establishment isn't ready to pull out the ghost and the skeletons in their closet. And baseball players who attempt to speak to me and clear their own conscience, Brendan and I have interviewed more than 30 baseball players who were conflicted then and they're conflicted now. Why? Because they're ultimately the ones that are hitting the ball. And I just don't call out MLB, I call out the MLB Players Union because Brendan and I discovered maybe 3 or 4 separate times it's come up in collective bargaining. And why wouldn't the Players Union just draw a line in the sand and say, "No, guys, we're going to bring in that outside agency of architects, engineers, and designers because we just haven't created that civilized society for the fan base, and it's time. It's long overdue." And I'm
And,
saying it's long overdue 2026.
that's bringing back the Japanese culture and
Mhm.
showing how much they more care about society more more so than the US, or that maybe their stats, they aren't saying all the stats in the most honest way. I don't know, because in that
Uh-huh,
culture, for sure, they do try to hide things to make it seem like it is more perfect,
uh-huh.
than it actually is. So I was going to also move into, like, recreational baseball. When I only played softball 1 year, and I only played
Mhm.
softball 1 year because during practice, we were playing catch and a girl got hit in the face with the ball, blood everywhere, very traumatic, and on top of that, I was a pitcher, so I was very scared of getting, hit in the face with the ball. But when you go to these rec baseball, softball games, kids, teens, even adults, there are no safeguards put in place at all. Is that part of your goal too, to make this aware, to also pivot into those avenues too, or
I'm Why not? Because since the Queens College student from a little over a year ago, and other parents have called me up from high schools and asking me to help their city, a place called White House, Tennessee, guys, believe it or not. Yep, city called White House, Tennessee. I've mentioned them a few times on these recordings with other guests. He called me, a man. He says, "Hey, Jordan, we can't have soccer and baseball going on at the same time. Can you help us?" I said, "I'm so happy that you're starting this conversation. Best of luck." What can I say? And then another gentleman calls me. He's owned the house for a decade next to a high school field. And he said, "Jordan, I bought a house next to a high school field in Illinois, and I'm having a problem with the community board. And I recently went to a meeting, and the guy said to me, you should have known in advance. You don't buy a house next to a high school field. It's similar to buying a house next to a pig farm. Like, you would know the scent would be not pleasant." So, and I was like, "Well, what about people who are outside in parking lots in professional ballparks? Buyer beware. Why should spectator beware in the parking lot? Why should this gentleman who bought a house next to a high school field been aware of that? It should have been the developer, or it should have been of that particular home, or it should have been, like in the case of Modesto or Brooklyn, the owners telling Brianna, maybe you don't want to park there." So a lot of people will do things, will continue to do things that, in my mind, it wasn't transparent. It wasn't the right thing. And everyone's legacy, this professional legacy of the image, I think is going to be addressed, and that's what we really want to do. And I think
so
we're going to
it
try all levels of baseball. Certainly, are now on my radar. So I'm like, sure, I'll talk to you. You know, no,
so if
yeah,
people then were given the warnings, do you think
yes,
then that justifies, as much as it is on a pack of cigarettes saying that this can
right,
cause cancer, but people are still gonna do it whether there's a warning or not. So
yep.
it's not necessarily protecting those people, because, I mean, common sense, just like if you were to buy a house on a golf course, you're gonna
Mhm.
know those golf balls can go in your house. I mean, people aren't
Sure.
that naive that they don't realize that, "Oh, there could be fly balls, coming
Sure.
into my home." Do you remember that movie, Simon Birch, where, I think it was Ashley Judd played his mom, and
Okay.
she got hit in the head by a baseball during a game and died. So,
Oh,
I mean,
man. I think somebody mentioned that to me a while ago. We're gonna have to check that out. Yep.
so it's not like people aren't aware of these things, and even there's risk involved in any activities that you do, whether someone's
Mhm.
telling you, "Okay, well, you can fly on this plane, but just so you know, there's
Mhm.
a percentage that you could die in a plane crash," but people are still gonna do it, right? At what point is it enough? It's not gonna change. Not every rec baseball is gonna have nets. They don't have the money for that. They can barely afford even putting a team together, right? But just
Mhm.
saying, "Hey, just so you know, this is at your own risk. You could get hit by a ball," then that
Mhm.
that makes everything okay. I mean, at what point
Mhm.
What's
Well,
your
again,
perfect
I'm very excited that we're the only ones making the conversation about it today, but there should be a real discussion going on all levels of baseball. Let's not pretend to begin with that it's not happening on the recreation level. Again, I haven't really been thinking much on the recreation level up until the Queens College student found me a year ago, a little over a year ago. People can see the 5 letters I wrote to the Queens College and the NCAA administration. So then it started from professional to college, and now I found out there's a ton more college baseball players and fields in colleges, and Brianna and I did a simple Google Earth of D1, 2, and 3 fields of 46 fields, and we're just scratching the surface, and they all seem to be connected to neighboring fields or parking lots. Rec level is rec level. This particular parent, he's been suffering for a decade now, a decade, and he's been complaining to this high school his kids can't have a normal recreational happenings outside their home when high school practice games or high school practices or games are going on because the balls could rain on their children. It's
Yeah, and I
just
mean
real all worthy of a conversation, and but there are billions of dollars on the top, and that's really what I've been thinking about. There's no excuse for a professional establishment to be acting this example I've used before, like a traveling carnival without a license. And that's basically the analogy or the example I would use. And Judge Flanagan, who, she'll meet me one day and say, Jordan, you keep on talking about me. But she did suggest willful wanton conduct in the case of Rybarsky versus White Sox. That's throughout professional baseball, 30 MLB teams, 120 minor league teams, 49 professional other teams that makes 199 teams. And then there's some others. And these are people that charge admission and they want to make money and they're treating us disrespectfully. And when are we going to finally address the disrespect past and present? And again, I'm happy to listen to anyone on any level of baseball. I believe we can create a baseball civilized society. And if that means redesigning different fields for the purpose of no more heads up is the only line of defense, for the person playing on another field, to figure it out. We just flew to the dark side of the moon, Danielle, a few months ago. We're on planet Earth. Let's have baseball with integrity, no strings attached. Is
yeah,
that
so
pie in the sky, or is that just trying to create a conversation? I'm gonna keep the pie in the sky and the high expectations because wouldn't we? We should. If we can think about flying to dark sides of moons, we could certainly hold, first and foremost, professional baseball with billions of dollars to the much higher standards they've never met. And then we'll worry about each zip code, or we'll do it simultaneously. But we have to have a conversation. I believe, Danielle, there are architects, engineers, and designers in your zip code, in all zip codes, that would be like, I love the challenge of making this field into the right space. And then we'll figure out who to pay for it, who pays for it, kind of thing.
really? Oh my but
What?
that's not real life, though.
I don't
I get what you're
know.
saying. I hear what you're saying, but
All right.
money runs
Yeah.
everything. Money runs
But
everything.
billions of but what about the 200 teams that certainly can get dedicated to that conversation inside and
I mean, I
outside?
definitely
Why don't
I
they
definitely
fix their
do
houses? No more Modesto surprises.
Yeah,
Crazy.
I mean, I definitely do think that it's a conversation that needs to be had, and not sure why one culture can do it and we can't mirror that, but at the
Right.
same time, I think they probably look at the risk involved and they think it's not worth their time. That's my thought as to why. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that
Yeah,
it should be that
that's
way.
what we do. That's what we do with foul ball safety now, and this is great that you're part of it, and you made a commitment to get into this with us for today, and we thank you. And we have a lot of recordings in our library, and we put up 10 on display because of people like you that are taking part in this. And it's just really a conversation, and effectively,
Yeah.
that's what we want to do. And we'll do what we can in this time together.
Yeah, Danielle. So, years later, you're able to recall this image that seems so vivid in your mind of your teammate being struck by a ball, and it was enough to make you want to quit softball. Why do you think that memory has stayed with you? And what impact do you think witnessing a foul ball injury has on people?
Well, it wasn't a foul ball injury, they were just actually playing catch. So, that led me to every time I play catch to put the shield my face. I think it just made me realize that anything can happen, like, we're never safe, and to just kind of be aware of your surroundings, and even as my kids both played baseball and softball, I was always very nervous with them playing. It was always in the back of my mind that they had to be careful, even as a spectator, for me to be careful, to be aware when you go to a sports complex and you have 4 or 5 games going on at the same time, I mean, there's so many things that could happen, but at the same time, that's life, and if we're scared of every single situation, the only thing that I can do is be cautious and try and protect myself and my kids the best that I can. But it doesn't deter me from going to professional games. It's just like I said, being aware. It did make me a little bit hesitant to have my kids play baseball and softball, so my husband definitely m eased me into saying they'll be okay kind of a situation. Accidents always happen, so
We appreciate that. I will just say, and you can get in the last word, because accidents and incidents are different definition. The incidences are predictable, and somebody told me to specifically check into that definition. Danielle, what's your thoughts on that? Accidents as opposed to incidences, and then we'll wrap it up.
I think, yes, depending on the situation, I mean, an accident is something that's not intentional. An incident is something that happens when, when you're not looking. I don't know. How did you
Yeah,
say that you define the 2?
yeah, yeah, so we were told that these baseball situations would be considered incidents as opposed to accidents because it's a predictable occurrence. It's not a matter of the next person getting crushed if, it's when. You know, Brendan and I spoke to 3 people in the last few months, 2 of them with recent injuries in the last few months, that kinda thing. So, you know, it's unfortunate, but Brendan and I will be learning of new incidences. But either way, we don't have to start stripping down the word.
This is a really interesting topic. I do think that more people need to talk about it because sometimes people are like, "Oh, if you're not talking about it, it doesn't exist in their eyes," I think. And I think maybe
Uh-huh.
some people are scared that if we do talk about it, it's gonna make it more real or it could happen to them. But just to be more aware when you're at the ball field and protect yourself as much as you can because always the greater good doesn't always look out for our culture, you know?
Well, that was good. So well said from your personal experience. And we will continue trying to effectively get more people talking about this with or without us. And then we can move on to other things. But it's exciting to be in season 7 with this conversation. And Brianna and Danielle, thank you again. And we'll do it again soon.